So this session, entitled Practical Compliance Tips to Master Efficiency, is designed to provide some practical solutions for what you can do now to improve efficiency and compliance outcomes. Here to coordinate the session, we have Conrad Travers, and unfortunately Celine Edtrack is unwell, so she gives her apologies today. Conrad is from Tangelo Advice Consulting. Tangelo provides support to advice businesses to help operationalise their compliance, including policy writing, improving processes and training staff, including completing the gap assessments for practices and licensees. Conrad will be joined by Mel Draco.
Yes.
Thank you, Mel. Who worked for Tangelo as an advice process, paraplanning and advice solutions expert, alongside her day job running the paraplanning and administration platform in Tango.
Tango.
Yeah. Beg your pardon.
Confusing.
That's okay.
Tangelo, Tango, you know.
Yes, all right.
Yeah.
Two names that we won't
It was
forget.
a coincidence.
We won't
Yeah,
forget it.
yeah.
I know.
As well as Paula Draney. Good, excellent. Paula has a detailed background in advice coaching, compliance, audit and learning and development. Paula will comment from the crowd and ensure there's lots of interaction today. Yes. Now finally we have, but not last, is Peter Warren from technology services company Finura. Finura is an independent provider of CTO services to build wealth businesses. Finura works with firms every day making improvements to their technology, and with over 40 IFA clients are versed on what to do and what not to do in the tech space. So please join us in welcoming the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. We're super excited to be here today. We wanted to run this session a little bit differently to some of the other sessions that you might have seen during the conference, in the sense that we want to be as interactive as possible. We don't mind if we don't get through all the slides. We really want to have a kind of a conversation with you guys around what's going on in your businesses and provide some practical tips to enhance efficiency and improve sort of compliance outcomes. So it is going to be interactive. We encourage you to put your hand up. We've got mic runners here. They can bring a microphone to you. But it's really about what you can get out of the session and take back maybe 2 or 3 sort of tips to help you with that journey. Now, just a quick poll. Who's excited about what the Minister just said?
Who's lying?
I'm not sure why we can't have the SOA and the the safe harbour piece now. Like, I don't know if there was a good answer to that one, but anyway. Probably shouldn't say that. Yeah. So in terms of the agenda, we're going to cover off new business process. So Mel's going to speak to that in a moment. We're going to talk about reviews and the ongoing service process. We think that there's not enough training and support for you around your ongoing service book. It's probably 80% of your revenue, and we talk too much about new business. So we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about what's next for SOAs. What do you do? Do you wait for the QAR changes? Are there things that you can do now to simplify your SOAs and really get on top of what we could do to make that a more engaging document for the client? And then finally, we want to make sure that we allow enough time for Pete at the end to talk through the technology impacts. Does that make sense? That's what we're going to cover today? Okay, Mel, over to you.
Okay. So Conrad asked me to stand up to bring more energy, and I said I look the same standing up as I do sitting down, but I'll stand up.
What's the height of it?
I know.
She's 4'11", I'm 6'4".
Stand up, okay.
Yeah, there's a claim right there. Yeah.
Okay, so I've been upfront, so we're doing our process, and I thought, let's do the new client process, and how do we make it more efficient? Everyone knows the new client process, but I thought, here's some starter tips that you can get started to make it more efficient in your office. And these are not the be-all and end-all. I was like, I could put everything in here, but I'll just start with these 5 tips. And the first thing I reckon you should do when you go back to your office is map out the new client process. And I don't mean map it out like what you think it looks like, but I say map it out actually what it is. It's going here, it's going there, they're using the wrong software. Just map out what the real process is so you can actually see where you need to improve it. So who maps out their process? Has anyone got process map? Okay. About 50%, 40%. Okay, so when you map it out, these are some ideas that you can do to make it more efficient. So the first one I've got there is moments of truth. And this is, look at the interactions that you have in there. Interactions with clients, interactions with internal staff members. What are the moments of truth that you need to speak to someone, collect information, do things? How many moments of truth are there? And I'll talk about that in a moment. Handover delays. So this is essentially what it means. How many times are you switching things over, which is causing inefficiencies in your process? There's probably going to be quite a few, especially if you map out the real process, not the ideal process. The third one is not too simple or not too complex. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail because I've seen really good process maps and I've seen really simple ones and really complex ones that are really way too cumbersome and you're looking at it and going, this is a pile of shit stuff.
Are we allowed to swear?
Oh no, I was like,
why not? Yeah.
Okay, the third one is compliance by design. So this is making sure the process has the compliance in it. And we'll talk about checklists and all that sort of stuff in a moment, but this is not having all this stuff over the top of your process, putting it in your process. And finally, validating and doing change management. So let's have a look at the new client process. This is a very simple step-by-step what you actually do. You have the first client contact, you're collecting client data, so that's in the first meeting or other methods. You're engaging the client saying, yes, we're going to do the advice. You're going to develop the advice, which is probably the biggest chunk of this process, and then finally going to present the advice to the client. So everyone's okay with that. So let's look at moments of truth. These are some instances of moments of truth that you can improve in your process. So the first contact, what are the clients getting from you when they first make contact? Are they getting an email that's got information in there so they can be prepared for the meeting, or are they just getting a 2-line email or just a calendar invite? This is a moment of truth where you can actually introduce the client to your business, give them information about, oh gosh, I'm going to be doing that, giving them information about what they can expect in your meeting and make it a really professional interaction. So if you're sending an email with no information in it whatsoever, no FSG, nothing, and they're coming to me and going, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, what I'm meant to be here, that interaction is going to be less valuable than if they were prepared for that meeting. So think about what are they receiving before that first initial contact. Obviously the FSG thing, we can do that obviously with websites now. Have you got your FSG on your website? Is the FSG up to date? Send them a link in their welcome email so they can read that beforehand. Send them a video explaining it. So you can do all these things with that welcome first contact. Secondly, collecting client data. Wow. I don't know if you saw the Paraplanner Hub survey, but 30% of fact finds that paraplanners get are still handwritten. It's like 2023, guys. Why are we still handwriting stuff, Let's start thinking about how we collect that data to make it more useful and that we only have to collect it once. So if you're handwriting stuff and then having to type it in and then having to validate it against something else, it's just all this stuff that we're doing that's causing delays. So collecting data effectively and efficiently is a good one. Also, the fact finds. Who loves their fact find? Shut up, you don't. No, you do? Okay. Fact finds.
Probably a compliance person. Yeah.
How many fact finds have we seen that are like 50 pages long, have got like millions of different sections they have to complete? Is it? No, I'm joking. I'm sure. No, I'm sure it's great. So let's look at the fact. This is one thing that you can improve in your process. Look at the fact find. Are there fields that are never ever entered, never ever taken down because you're looking at a statement of super statement. I'll get it out one day. Superannuation statement or anything like that. They never actually fill in the fact find. So why are we making these fact finds really hard to complete? Also, don't send a client a 50-page fact find before the meeting and overwhelm them. Like, we don't have to do that. If you want to send something to the client beforehand, maybe send a cut-down version just so they don't have to put all their client data in something that they're going to email back to you. Like, let's not do that.
Just on that point, how many of you send an email to the client before to ask for certain information for a new?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably about half.
How many use the client portal to do that job?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many clients send it back? Yeah. Oh, you don't have the meeting? Oh, we'll talk about that in a moment. Cut them off.
Did everyone hear that? So if they don't complete it, they don't have the meeting.
Yep.
Yeah. So your conversion rate's probably already going to go. Yep.
Right. So think about how you're collecting that data. It's another moment of truth, collecting that data. So then you don't have to come to the client meeting and you're just filling in a fact find. Make it a more valuable interaction. The third one is the engagement with the client. So you're engaging the client, you're saying you're going to do the advice for them. Is this a valuable interaction? Are you giving them a to-do list of what they need to go back and give you more information, or are you just going and signing on the dotted line with an engagement that's not really clear about what you have to do, and then they're still not sure what's going to happen? Give them the next steps, tell them what's happening, book in the next meeting, give them some confidence that you're going to get that advice to them in a short amount of time. And I know that paraplanning turnaround times may impact that, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, developing advice. So, co-developing advice with your paraplanner. So obviously I've got the paraplanning platform, and this is the biggest time delay. Going back, who goes back and forth to paraplanner, trying to get information. I've seen paraplanners, I've seen plans. I'll get a fact find that has some data in it, a paraplanning request with other data in it, then I go to the other file on a file note and have another figure in there, and I'm like, oh my God, so I have to go back to the advisor and go, which one do I use, this one, and that one? They're like, oh, I don't know. So then they have to go over there and find the real, it's just time delays. So that comes down to having a single source of truth, sending the right information to the paraplanner, and I think co-developing at that start, having a meeting with your paraplanner, a valuable interaction to talk about what the advice is going to be, look at the modelling, see if it's going to work out, rather than them having to do the SOA. The modelling's all wrong. Then you go, oh, can you change it? Then they have to regenerate the advice again. This is all crap. We have to stop doing that. So co-develop with your paraplanner. And then a good tip is, and this is what I've been using lately and it's been working very nicely, is having a shared Word document with what the advice is, details, and a comments column. And the comments column is where they can ask questions and you can respond, and it's a shared document. Then you save that document, and that's evidence of all the development of that advice. So instead of going back and forth with emails,
Yep.
mark it up.
On SharePoint. Yep.
Have we got any paraplanners in the room?
Hey.
Can I just ask maybe someone to comment, what is the biggest cause of delay? Do you mind commenting if we get a microphone to you? When you're going through the process, what are the main causes of delay for you?
Is actually getting the source of information. What's the right amount? What do you want us to actually look
Facts
at?
and figures.
Yeah, not so much the strategy. We can help develop that or talk to the advisor about it, but what are we actually looking at in the first place?
So in this two-way street where we're trying to co-create this beautiful advice document, the 80-20 piece of getting things right at the start would make life more efficient for you further down.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay, cool.
In the survey, it was like 90% of the issues were with data, having conflicting data. So that's just something to keep in mind. Presenting the advice, how are you presenting the advice? If we're not going to have SOAs anymore, what are you going to use? Are you going to use something else? Are you going to have more, are you doing engaging presentations, or are you just reading an SOA? So think about that interaction with the client. Are you really getting the message across of why the advice is important to them? So that's, the last point there. We see in processes where you have a meeting and then you have 5 different people in the meeting. That's a very expensive meeting. Think about how many people need to be in that meeting. Do they need to be there? Are they just in there taking notes? Just use transcription software. I mean, like, you don't need to have 5 different people in a meeting and have a very expensive meeting. So think about that as well.
Just to that point, we had one client where they had the advisor and the support staff in the meeting, and we asked the support staff member, do you understand what's going on? And they were like, no, I've never been trained. I don't really understand. I'm just recording notes. So what's the problem with that? It's a waste of time, right? So you're better off having a 45-minute meeting and then booking in 15 minutes to debrief that person after. They take away all the actions and the notes, and then you go. So just think about that, yeah.
I had to do that. I broke my hand at the start of the year and had to take a staff member who hadn't been trained, but I had no choice.
Yeah.
And I took them to the meeting, and the notes they took, I had no idea what
Yeah.
they took down. So absolutely, you've got to train that person before
They've
you
got
take
to understand
them to
the
a
why,
meeting
right?
if you're going to. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got a question back there, Paula. You're going to get your steps in for sure. Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation of transcription software that you use?
Tech guy.
So all care, no responsibility recommendations. All things being equal, we would always suggest you use, if you're using video meetings, use Teams. So Teams has transcription built into it. It also has wonderful AI capability coming into it now, which will generate summaries. It even tells you who spoke the most, how long you spoke for, what was the tone.
That would be
Were they
interesting.
curious? And the really cool feature for staff who maybe can't join for a full meeting is if they're late to join, it'll give you a summary now of what you missed in the first 20 minutes. I don't think we should be rewarding late arrivals, but nonetheless. So we would advocate that will be your source of truth for that, Teams.
What's it called in Teams? Like, where do people actually go to?
So on the very top, there's a button saying record,
Yep.
transcribe. Click that.
Okay.
If you don't have that setting turned on, talk to your IT managed services provider and tell them to turn on that Teams feature. You may need a Teams premium subscription, which will cost you $30 a month, really money well spent. You can actually customise your Teams now, make it look really, really professional with your branding and all that stuff. Dead set no-brainer. If Teams isn't right for you, if you're one of the Google people or something like that, that software will do it as well. The other software which we hear people using for a face-to-face context is something like Otter, O-T-T-E-R. A lot of lawyers use that. You can literally put your phone down, it'll record the meeting, transcribe, and Otter now has some AI features which allows you to generate really nice meeting summaries and file notes out of it as well. So I just want to be really, really clear on one thing. You do not need to buy a bespoke file noting app with AI built into it. It's nonsense. You literally use those enterprise tools that you're already using that are fit for purpose for that job. That's all you need. You can, it's probably not as effective because it won't necessarily pick up but you can record the meeting, absolutely. It just might not be as effective in the transcription of who's speaking when, but you'll still get a dump of all the data as well. The only other bit of advice, caution, is with the compliance side, is if you are recording everything,
You can't unknow stuff.
it's entirely a file note then, is my understanding as well. So this is probably an unintended consequence thing to consider. I don't know, I'll hand that to you.
Well, yeah, and I don't know how much you guys are across the current breach and incident rules, but basically, once you know stuff, you can't unknow it, and the clock starts ticking as soon as you know it. So, like, if you record it via a transcription, that's you knowing it. So you, as a licensee or whoever your licensee is, would need to assess whether whatever's come out of that is an incident or not. So just keep that in mind.
Our clients are pretty cool with being recorded now. What's the read? Are we comfortable to record our clients?
Hang on, Amy, can you just wait for a sec? No, you're keen, everything.
I record every single meeting.
Yep.
So I started actually in 2019 doing all my meetings via Zoom.
Right.
And when I talk to them first, when we schedule our call, I explain that the meeting's recorded, but it's also going to be considered a file note and they can have a record of it. So they are very comfortable with that process.
Right.
Did everyone hear how she positioned it though? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the hard bit. We have to get comfortable with
Your
it first.
question.
Hi.
Sorry, yeah.
So I used to run the advice assurance team, so doing the audits, and all the file notes were written at that time. Then we transitioned across to some of our advisors using recorded file notes, and their audit results improved because we could hear the tone of voice from the client. You could gather that the client understood the advice, and advisors are great talkers, but not necessarily good writers and good file note takers. So we actually saw an improvement.
Yeah, and like I'm not surprised by that because my general experience with advisors is that they're outstanding at giving the advice. They're just shithouse at making the files look good. Yeah. So as a...
Can I just comment on that?
Yeah, go. Yep.
I was going to comment on it later, but I thought it's a good
just
point now. I think that's a really good call out. Advisors are really good at, going through the journey, the education process, but what I see in file notes is you only ever see the outcome. So it's, the client was comfortable with X, Y, Z, but you don't see the journey of how they got there, which is really actually the most important part in the file note. And I think I agree with that. I think, those recordings are going to give you that journey. What's the process they went through? What's the context that was educated? The questions that may have been asked that a lot of times are missing just in a straight file note.
Because that is interesting, right? So by going to greater transparency, it's actually helped with the story. Because what happens when you look at the file and you say to an advisor, why did you recommend a co-contribution strategy or a salary sacrifice in this situation? They talk to you about it like that, right? Because they know the client really well, but it's not on the file. So, Can you just wait 1 sec, sorry?
Yeah, it's really easy to see the basis of the advice, that kind of thing.
Beautiful.
When you can all hear it.
Yeah. Okay. Mel, we might have to accelerate. We might have to get past slide 2.
Oh, quick question.
Okay.
Anyone got any tools for recording phone conversations? I know if you've got like a bespoke voice, you can do it. And I know on some, you can do it on like non-Apple products. You can hit record. Any other ideas for recording phone conversations so you can hear both sides, not just one side?
Ooh, that'd be good for my boyfriend.
Yeah, so if you have an Android phone, you can get this software. I think the legalities of that are still really unclear. I'd be really cautious with that, personally. Just put on speaker and record it. Well, yeah, that's another option. Okay.
There's no laws that apply in Queensland, is it right?
So, yeah. Okay.
Bikies, that's why.
We're going to keep
should I
rolling.
continue? Yeah. So handover lag is a simple one. Is just the way to look at that is do swim lanes. Have you heard of swim lanes? With people that are doing the task, and that'll show you how many times things have been switched over to different people. So if you do that, that will give you an idea how much handover has been happening, and maybe that's causing some of the lags. But I'll go to process mapping and process guides. Now, simple process maps I've seen, it'll be like 4 boxes like that, bum, 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 going in one line. It's very simple. It'll say something like enter into Xplan, prepare the advice, which is great, but it hasn't got enough information for someone to pick it up and go, I know what's going on. Also, I think that when I see that you haven't considered, what if that doesn't happen, what do you do? So if a client doesn't come in or they haven't showed up for their review, what do you do now? Do you have to turn the fees off? So there should be decision points in a flowchart, and it should sort of go like that. It should have some sort of arms coming off it. So if you've got process maps that are in a straight line, I would suggest that maybe that needs a review to make sure you've got all the elements in that process map, because if you don't tell someone what to do when that thing doesn't happen, what do? They're just going to make it up and they're going to do their own thing, and they're going to have different people doing their own thing, and that's how you get inconsistencies in your process, because they don't know what to do and they have to make it up. So that's something to look for. The other thing is process guides. So you can't just have a process map, because the process map is the outcome of that task. The process guide tells someone how to do that task, who, what, and how. So the process guide needs to be with the process map, so they can understand, walk in the office and go, oh, I need to enter this into Xplan, how do I do that? Okay, I have to get the fact find, enter it here in Xplan. They watch a little video and they know how to do that. So that is it's a double thing that you have to do when you're doing process mapping. Don't put the steps of how to do it in a process map. I've seen process maps where it's got a box and it's got all these arms coming off it with all the steps and how to do it. Very confusing. So just have two, yes, sorry.
Scott, hang on, one more question.
Experience versus theory.
Sorry?
Experience versus theory. I ran a licensee. We process mapped and process guided everything back in the 90s and 2000s. No one read the stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's my next point.
And what they kept on doing,
pardon?
Because I was a responsible manager and I was in charge of operational systems, and essentially I'd say, why aren't you reading this stuff? Because it's easier to talk to a work colleague.
Can I grab that? Is that all right?
Yeah.
This happens all the
So
time.
you guys all need to have a single source of truth, okay? And even that is hard because sometimes you guys have multiple versions of documents. They're saved in your My Docs. Someone's got it in their Teams. It might be on your email, right?
Desktop.
And when the regulator comes in, you want to have one source of truth, right? That's a gap for almost every licensee that we've worked with. The way to bring it to life is not to have a PDF document that sits in a server somewhere. Is actually what we've done. We've actually brought together an online tool which brings together the source of truth for the current version of processes, process maps, templates in one place. We've got a tool that we can recommend to support around that. But what the really key part is that you've got to then empower staff to own it. If you do it as managers and say, here's our new process, it's just going to sit in a drawer. It's got to be like, okay, who's got that process? You need to then own it, review it, improve it, enhance it. And there's got to be a way that they can also ask questions and improve processes over time.
Yep, so that online thing, the way it's set up, it's got links to the templates you need to use. So people using the same templates. It's got a glossary so you know what the terms are. I don't know how many times I've been in office. Is this working? Okay, better. You see an admin person, and I was in there and she was like, oh, I didn't do that step. I said, well, it was a recontribution strategy to remind her to look at it. And she goes, I just don't know what that means. So she just left it. So make sure people understand what the terms are as well.
Hang on, we've got a question, Mel. Yep.
Sorry, it was more of a comment, I guess. We do it slightly differently, and it's working reasonably well so far. We're on a journey. It's early days, but our process and our instructions are within the task themselves at each stage of the journey.
Nice.
So you're not actually going to those PDFs in a different place, which absolutely never got looked at, or were too complicated for people to follow because they're trawling through different pages to find the part of the process that they need. They still do talk to colleagues, they still do look at everything else, but we keep pulling them back to just look at that task. All the information that you should need to complete that task is within that task itself.
And Xplan obviously has that with your threads. You can put all the information in there. There's checklists in there as well in Xplan. You can definitely do that. We recommend it. And just make sure it marries. If you do have a process guide that marries up to a Xplan thread, make sure the numbers are the same, the process is the same. You just got to look at that.
And sorry, just to comment on that, I think that's really good, is embedment's actually the biggest part of change. I think everyone thinks the change is the biggest part. Embedment is the biggest part, where you've got to constantly reinforce, recheck, reinforce.
And that, so we do a lot of policy work, and we end up, in most cases, simplifying people's policies back to legal requirements, how to prove compliance, and this best practice. A lot of the documents we write are much simpler than what the licensee already has. And because we're actually focusing on everything that matters from a principal point of view rather than all the other stuff where people include examples or they actually go into operating procedures, so that's got to stay out. Your policy document should be simple. But the thing that matters is less about the policy document, because how many of you read policy documents? Yeah, right? So it's actually about the embedment and the change. So how do you roll it out? How do you do the one-page summaries? Does everyone in the licensee know that their role within that policy? So it's less about the stuff, more about how you manage the change of the stuff.
So the last, I realise I'm running out of time, but the checklist, this is exactly what you're talking about. Don't have a separate checklist. Have the process be the checklist. So if you've got evidence of it being done, like for instance, giving a client FSG, it's in the email, the client's received the email, that's a check. Don't have another separate checklist to go, yep, I've done that, because the evidence is there that you've done it and it's on the file. So just think about checklists. It is a time waster, checklist. If people are doing checklists all the time, try to incorporate it in the process. Don't let them move on until they complete that step. That's a checklist. And finally, controls. I was going to, Paula, you're good at this, the controls in a process.
I think the biggest thing around controls is you can't control everything, and just be realistic around that. I see a lot of businesses that just try to control everything 100%. You really need to focus on what your key risks are. So really get an understanding of what those key risks are in the business. Focus on them. That doesn't mean you have to check everything 100% either. I see a lot of roadblocks. One practice I worked with, implementation was a bit of an issue, and they checked 100% of every single transaction, yet it was specific transactions that were the risk. So how can you focus your control on that specific risk rather than 100%? It was a huge bottleneck. Never set and forget. Controls are not set and forget. If your risk is reduced, if you've improved your process, think about whether you need to keep doing that control. Again, that example with the implementation of transactions was a huge cost to the business. 12 months hadn't found a single error in the 100% quality assurance. Question is, why are you still doing it if it's been resolved? Also think about what the issue is and where it goes wrong in the process. I see a lot of times that the control is actually at the wrong place of where the risk is. Another business, for example, that I worked with had an issue around contributions. They thought it was a concern in the advice formulation. So they've set a control up prior to plan presentation. It was actually an issue in implementation post-advice. So your control is costing you a lot of money here, but your errors are still happening. Business can't figure out why the errors are still happening because control is in the wrong spot. So also think about what that root cause is.
Okay, guys, we're going to do a quick poll, so grab your phones. Everyone know how to do this? You just go to the app, you go to the session agenda item, click on it, and then I think there's a poll tab there. Everyone cool with that? So the question is, do you have a team member who challenges your file to see if they can understand what has occurred or how you got to the advice that you've recommended? In other words, do you have someone in your office who challenges the advice that you're giving? So we'll just wait for answers to come up on that. What do you reckon, Pete? 40%?
I think lower.
Lower?
I don't think people have time.
I'm going to say higher, 60.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we bring up the results? Or do I need to do a thing? Yeah, I know. Back.
Oh.
They're working it out. Sorry, Amanda. And look, the reason that we're asking this is that we think it's really important because with an advisor who's been in the industry for a long time and they're very experienced, there's often a desire to just push through on what they think is the right thing to do. And we all know that the same client given to 5 different advisors would probably end up with 5 different pieces of advice. So the role of having someone challenge that is really important, where they go, you don't have best interest here. Yeah? So yes, 67%. Wow, that's actually impressive. Yeah. Can anyone comment about how it works in their office and how they've found it to be effective and also being open to being challenged? Yeah, right at the back there. Where you go, Paula?
There you go, Paula.
Whee!
I should have worn my runners.
Yeah.
Thank you for voting, by the way. Yep.
Hi. I suppose the word that comes is collaboration. So it's a collaborative effort between your various staff, but also the external advisors, so the accountant, the lawyer. So and that's what we do is have whoever's the expert in every area, they're included in it, and then also training in regards to your operations team knowing more than what their job is, basically what they do in a day, but understanding what you guys were talking about as well, what strategies are and so on. And that just comes down to the culture, I suppose, of having curiosity when it comes to staff wanting to know more, even though it might not be in their mandate.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that. And look, that probably talks to that point before about, the paraplanning role and really the way that you see that role. If you see that role as an administrator who pulls together plans and you're just frustrated by delays, you're probably going to get one kind of outcome. But if you can change the way you think about the paraplanner to be, I think we need a different word than paraplanner, by the way, because it's kind of a bit outdated, but more like...
Our planner.
Yeah. That advice gateway support person, I don't know, better words, but someone that can really be involved in the co-creation of the advice. It elevates their sense of worth and also means that you're talking together about how you can create the advice as opposed to the administration side of it. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. Paula.
Me.
Have a chat about the file and the story piece.
I hinted at this a little bit earlier, so I did cover this. I think the biggest thing is what we're talking about, and I think one of the advantages or benefits that was raised around the file is really getting that story. And I think when you think about the file, sometimes I feel that people are looking for the one document that tells the whole story. The reality is it's not just one document, it's all the documents put together. So don't focus just on one document that has to tell the story. It's really the holy grail of your file note, your fact find, your SOA together, really telling the story of how the client went from A to B and what the decision points were along the way. But just some tips from that in the file. Objectives is really your foundation. And what I see going wrong a lot is objectives being the solution. I see a lot of objectives that is, I want to do contributions or I want this strategy. That's your solution. The challenge that you have if your objectives is the solution, you make a rod for your own back, because how do you consider any other alternatives? There is none, because the goal is the only one solution. The reality is that when it comes to the objectives, the reason for the solution is the goal. So if a client genuinely comes in and says, I want to do this, ask them why you want to do that. What's the reason for it? If you get that foundation really well, the rest of your process will come together. The file notes is really about supplementary to what's not already in the file. So it's not about duplication. You don't want to duplicate. What's in the fact find, what's already in research. Your research documents can be part of your file notes. Other things as well, think about the creativity, voice recording file notes. Other things, I don't know, a lot of advisors like scribbling on whiteboards, flowcharts, drawing notes, yeah. If you did it on whiteboards, if you've got an electronic whiteboard, print it off, take a photo, it's a file note. Don't think it's all about having to write file notes, but it's, can you tell that story of going from A to be and how your advice is going to bring them there. Alternative strategies, I see it a lot as a ticker box. The reality is most of you have already thought about half a dozen things that you weren't going to do, but you forget to write them down and you think, oh, now I've got to think of some alternatives, and they come up with some ticker box. But think about really when you're having that conversation with the client, documenting down, not doing this for this reason, because the reality, that is your alternative.
Just on the objectives one, like a good example of going a bit deeper to get to the why could be, and I'm keen to hear from practitioners on this, is you ask them what their goals and objectives are, and they say maybe an adequate retirement. You say, well, what would that look like for you? I don't know, 50, 60,000 at year X. Maybe they don't even know that, but you can guide them to that. But then the why question is really important. So what would that mean for you? Oh, I really want to do the Grey Nomad tour, and I want to go see my son over in Edinburgh every 3 years. And then beyond that, you go to, well, again, that thing you've got to ask another question. Why does it matter to you? And she's like, well, my mum grew up poor and I don't want to have the same thing happen to me. So you can go from like $60,000 a year of income here to really not wanting to go through something that her mum went through. So just by that active questioning piece.
I think just to add to that as well, because I get a lot of questions around objectives. People talk a lot about SMART objectives, specific, measurable, achievable. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be quantified. Can I just say that you don't necessarily have to come up with a miraculous figure of it has to be this much income, particularly if the client's not sure, or by when. But those questioning could be, well, do you think you're going to need more income than what you're spending now? Do you think it's going to be less? So you've got an idea of what you're actually needing to achieve. It may not be a number, but you've got an idea of, in the context of where the client is today, what that means. So when you're building your advice, you know what you're aiming for. Same with time frame. Client might not know if they're going to retire in 5 years' time, but you know if it's short term, medium term, long term, like how far away are we? So don't get wrapped up in, I have to get quantified figures if they're realistically not there.
Oh, we've got a question at the back. Oh. Before we start talking about strategy lunches.
I get this.
Go back one. Yep.
In the original email that we send out to the clients, in like the little fact find, we actually ask about their goals and objectives, so it's not skewed by the discussion that they have with the advisors, and then it also then gives their information written in their own hand to then, so it's not skewed.
Yeah, it's a starting point, right? Yeah.
The initial why, and then you can flesh from there.
Can anyone else comment about their process around how they go a bit deeper? Oh, Paul. G'day, Paul.
Just a slightly different comment. Firstly, I just want to say it's like the best one-page summary I've seen on how to get a file.
Woo!
So well done on that. I think that's really good. When we act as an independent expert or do litigation around an advisor, often, I have seen this happen sometimes, the first file you'll look at does tell a really good story, and then the second one tells a really similar story.
Yes.
And then they all tell the same story.
Yeah, and templated file notes within that?
Yeah, we've seen like really good tailored file notes that have actually been copied and pasted.
Yeah.
And so obviously that you've got to take a step back and look at a whole range of different files to see if that's happening.
I'll get that.
So people get familiar with their strategies. The second point, I guess, the only other point I was going to make was just with the objectives there, because the software will template in the objectives, it's actually not that hard to click, depending on which software you're using, and add a few words to the templated objective, and it instantly is tailored. It's clear that you're considering what you've had discussions about in the file, and it's not actually that hard.
Yeah, awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, did everyone capture that? Yep.
And I think that's a really good point. Can I just add to that? I think, we use file note templates from an efficiency perspective. And I think, file note templates are good from a perspective maybe from like an agenda setting, like what are the key things I need to record? But yes, be careful that you don't put I've seen a lot of templated file notes where the words are exactly the same and you forget to move the he or she, and you're talking about a female and you've got the he and you go, yeah, okay, that looks... but I think the real value out of an advisor's file note, your education process is fairly similar with most of your clients when you're talking about things, so that does look very much the same. But the client's questions or responses to that is what will be different. So when you're thinking about running your file notes or focusing on that, focus on what they said or what they asked and how you responded to that, rather than necessarily the education process as much.
Okay, we do need to move on. Okay, this is all a thing that I think that you guys can do. Okay, the idea is that you have a strategy lunch booked in the diary with support staff, and not a lot of effort, but again, explaining the why. Okay, so there's a few different ways that you can approach this. You can go with the sharing approach, which is where you pick a topic and you kind of teach each other or have a session about whatever it might be, different types of strategies. You can lead them through a discovery process through the exploring approach, or you can follow the unique topic approach where you might talk about aged care or some ethical case studies. But the really important thing is that people need to understand why you've recommended what you've recommended. So one approach that I've seen work really well, and we've helped a client with this, is you take a couple of client files and you actually explain the why of what you've recommended. But you actually take the time to say, there's no dumb questions here. Does everyone understand what a TTR is? And just ask that question, right? And you'll get people that will be like, I'm afraid of the hierarchy, I don't want to ask the question. So you've got to go further and say, you tell me what a TTR is, right? And they try and explain it. Maybe they get it right, maybe they get it wrong, that's fine. And then you explain it, but then you maybe put it into dollar terms about how it's beneficial for this particular client. And that's when you get to the why. So this is why it's great for Mrs. Smith, because of this strategy, and this is what her objectives were. Everyone understand that? Any questions? Yes, no? Okay, now let's talk about, from a workflow perspective, how we can manage the tasks or the underlying transactions around that, now that we know why it's important for our client sets. Yeah?
Can I just add the importance of this, the understanding of why it's important for the support staff to understand this? I had a situation with a practice where I was interviewing some staff members who used to do the research calls for super contributions. And exploring them, I asked, do you understand what these questions mean? They knew they had to ask what the last 3 years contributions were, but they didn't know why. So the challenge that would happen is that if they didn't get the response per their checklist from the product provider, they didn't know what else to ask. And immediately your research process has ground to a halt because they go, I'm stuck now, I don't know what else I need to ask if it's not the response that they know they should get.
Who thinks they can do this? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to ongoing service. Paula, do you want to just maybe quickly flick through this?
I'll quickly cover this. I think, what does everyone, I'll try and make it quick, but what does everyone think the review is? Is it just when it's due, the advice? It's, I've got a service due on 1 July for the client. Is that the review? It's constant? Yeah. I think the biggest thing what I've seen is think about your substantive contacts, the substantive work that you've done with clients already throughout the year. I see a lot of businesses that have done various pieces of advice for the client throughout the year. It may have been reactive because the client had all of a sudden an immediate need for something. That is, you still have to review their position. You still have to review where they are. That's still a review. So I see a lot of practices that actually deliver more than what their agreement is because they're not considering what they've already done throughout the year, but they're due on 1 July, so I've got to give a review.
Does everyone get that point? So like if you have an annual review, you may have already done your review. So check your licensee policy because that's an immediate efficiency benefit if it's that you've already substantively reviewed the client's circumstances. I just want to make sure people get that because that's an efficiency win.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Review post 12 months comes up. I think I've seen various things. Is there any tolerance? Do you give clients an option to go outside their 12 months or it's strict? How far in advance do you engage your client for that? Any thoughts? 60 days? You want to engage their client 60 days ahead of their review? 90 days? For the following year? Yeah.
Just on this is really important. for potential future remediation. So if you're engaging your clients at the 10th and 11th month and they can't come in and the meeting occurs outside the 12th month, that's non-delivery. Whether you like it or not, that's non-delivery, okay? If you have the meeting in the 8 to 10 month mark and so let's say the SOA takes whatever time period it takes to fulfill, the advice should be given within the 12 months, which is, in our view, and people have different views on this, by the way, the review meeting and the file note. We think the file note completes the review. The fact that the implementation of the SOA might take longer than 12 months, different licensees have different views on this, by the way, depending on how far they've been through with ASIC. And by the way, please don't do this, in your ongoing service agreement, don't put a documented annual review. If you do that, you must deliver the document within the 12 months. So you're just setting yourself up to fail if there's a delay on paraplanning or implementation and things like that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And similarly to, your services are aligned to the contract. So think about what you've actually got in your contract. Less is more a lot of the time. I've seen a lot of things in contracts around validation of parking. If you come in, how are you gonna evidence that you validated their parking? Also think about things that are ad hoc. It's much more difficult to evidence the absence of a need for something than a need for something. So they go, we'll do this for you if needed. How can you demonstrate it wasn't needed during the period? So less is more in a lot of those cases. And similar to what Conrad was saying is think about the document is not necessarily the advice. If it's an ROA, you don't necessarily have to give the ROA, but if you're writing in your agreement that you're going to deliver them an advice document, you're now restricted to having to do that rather than potentially keeping that on the file.
How many of you have access to your advisors as one of your ongoing services? Yeah. So if I was your consultant, what I would say to you is every 12-month period, I would love to see a phone call in your CRM to prove that you've done that. So simply being available isn't enough in our view. So to really protect yourself, I'd love to see that phone call, because what does access to your advisor mean?
Yeah. Or consider whether that's your CVP. One is your customer value proposition. That's a nice to have. You have access to me, those sorts of things, but be very simple on what you're actually putting in your contract terms, so you don't tie yourself up in knots. Be careful of disengaged clients. If they're disengaged and you ring them up for a review, they don't want to come in, or they don't think it's necessary because they think, look, everything I do is set and forget, think whether they should be on the agreement, because ASIC will look at it and go, well, what's the purpose of this, this service for the client? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Paula, can you just repeat that so people can hear? Sorry.
I've actually, not really sacked them, but I've threatened to sack them as clients because I actually explain you are now becoming a liability to me. I have an obligation to serve you. This is part of our agreement and we need to meet. I know you might not think that there's something that you need me right now, but at least let's just have a quick check-in where you're at. And if they usually quickly jump in because they freak out that they're going to lose me because they don't realise how important that is.
Yeah, and just also be aware of confirmation bias on have anything in your circumstances changed? Because everything in your body as a financial advisor wants them to say no, right? But what matters from a compliance perspective is the next question is, okay, well, tell me more about whatever it might be. It might be, is there an opportunity for your parents to look at aged care? Do we need to look at estate planning? Is there an opportunity for intergenerational wealth transfer? They're not going to think of those things. They're just going to go, nothing's changed, right? So we want to see a little bit more than just has something changed, and then file note, file note, file note.
Yeah. Fixed term agreements, if you're on fixed term agreements, I think, QAR with potentially FDS going, it's probably a good time to think if it's worth the admin burden, I'll be honest. You're doing annual opt-in anyway, but if you are currently on a fixed term agreement, be aware of continuous fixed term agreements that don't have any changes in fees, no changes in terms. They are for a set period for set services, but if they continuously roll over with the same fee, the same services year after year, there's a risk that, they're going, is this really an ongoing service agreement rather than a fixed term agreement
that a lot, by
or a
the way.
service for a period of time?
Just Paul's got a comment on that, yep.
I think one of the reasons why a lot of people use fixed term agreements is there was this myth that some of the big dealer groups had these closed door meetings with ASIC and got the thumbs up that it was okay to do that. And so, because as you know, we have hundreds of advice licensees using our ongoing fee arrangement template. We also have an FTA template. We actually directly asked ASIC's legal team in the financial advisor team, some of their lawyers who are responding to these questions, did you actually have that conversation? And they said, we did not. Okay. We did not sign off on rolling fixed term agreements. This is what ASIC said to us. It wasn't formal or public.
See, I think the main reason they haven't done it is they don't want to send an FTS.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
And then they morally justify it by saying, well, we give them that information in other ways.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's a dog's breakfast, the current arrangement, and hopefully it does get simpler. Just one, like legally, it's an ongoing fee arrangement, and the word arrangement is wider than contract. So if you have a contract that looks and smells the same that you renew every year, just as you said, Paula, it's probably an ongoing arrangement. So the law is deliberately wider than just it being a contract.
Yeah, so over here we've got ongoing service agreements with an FTS, and is it 150 days after anniversary date that you've got to, yeah? Yep, so FTS, ongoing service agreement. Over here you've got, we don't want to send an FTS, we're sending a fixed term agreement which must complete at the end of the 12 months, no FTS. In the future, post FTS going, it won't really matter. The difference is going to be immaterial. I'd say you're probably better off going on ongoing service agreements because you've got that 150-day window. So FTSs aren't going to be there anyway, so why wouldn't you do that? Yeah, does that make sense? We do need to move on.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. I'll jump through this quickly because I want to give Pete a bit more time. Reverse engineering costs versus time. So this is all about, we see a lot of financial advice businesses who have, say, gold, silver, bronze packages, and they might go $8,000, $6,000, $4,000, let's say. But there's been no thought about what are the underlying tasks that sit within those different packages and whether those clients are actually profitable at those different levels. So what I'm saying is if you have the time, and there's people out there that can help you with this, try and process or document what the service delivery options are and price in the margin and the profitability into the packages as opposed to just picking sort of three numbers. You have a matrix? Yep. Yep. Beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Second one, clients update their situation. I think we've spoken about reverse fact finds. Yep. It's going to save you time. Digital portals, really useful. Make the review experience valuable. Make them really excited about coming for the review. You want to make them refer friends because it's such an amazing experience. Understand what completes a review. I think we've spoken about that. So that's the piece around you might already be completing a review and not know it. And the last one is really important. So make sure you survey your clients to understand what they actually want. I know that sounds really stupid, right? But how many of you have actually asked your clients what they want? And yeah, a few. Was there anything surprising that came out of that? Can we just...
So we've used just a few SurveyMonkey ones, so just anonymous ones, and Knowledge Centre. They loved the Knowledge Centre and just those newsletter stuff, just the general info they loved.
Yep.
We really cut back to, we don't need the fluffy stuff, we just need what we need to send out compliance-wise, and they really like that because it's just what they need to know and not all the sort of stuff in between.
Like we see a lot of advisors who go, for the premium service, we're going to add an extra review.
Or two.
And an investment review, and you just go, do the clients actually want this? Like, have you asked them? I don't think they do. I really don't. I think they're paying for the personalised access to you, primarily. It was interesting, we had one client where they went out and asked this, and then they also asked, by the way, do this, ask them what their hobbies and interests are. Yeah? We had this one client who asked that, and 70% of them were into gardening. So what did they do? They organised a gardening seminar. They get the gardening guy who talks about plants and fertiliser and shit, and sorry.
It is.
Yeah.
You're
it
right.
actually is shit, right? Yeah. And they loved it, right? And then what did they do with the magazines in the foyer? Gardening magazines, right? So, like, value is not really what you might think it might be. It's really what they are telling you what they need. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, let's get on to, reasonably quickly, the section on the SOA.
Skip.
Yep.
I'm not
Let's give Pete 10 minutes, yeah?
I'm really loving this slide. I'm going to skip it now. Spent a lot of time on those animations. Okay. I'll skip forward.
I'll put that in the feedback.
I know. So this is just, obviously, things are going to change with the SOA. Maybe a lot, maybe not so much. We don't know yet. But what we thought is, what can you do now to make the SOA a bit more palatable for your clients? And just from experience of what I've seen in SOAs, I thought I could just maybe do some suggestions, especially for the paraplanners in there. And this doesn't mean you have to go and recode your SOA, but just some things you can maybe take out of the SOA that's in there now that's probably not as relevant as it should be. So the first one, I see this so much. So you have a strategy, and then you have 15 benefits and 15 risks in there, and it's a page long. And some of them are just so relevant for a client that why are you telling a client that's got 200,000 in super, has got 2 years to retire, that they may reach their transition cap of 1.9 million? Like, why are you telling that a client? It's not a risk for them. It's not a risk for them. So put only risks and benefits that are relevant for a client. And you'll cut down a page of risk and benefits to maybe 2 or 3. I'll tell you that now. So instead, if you really want to tell the client that they've got a 1.9 million cap and make them feel bad about themselves, put that into a fact sheet so they can read it in their own time and learn about superannuation legislation when they're, before bed. So put that in a fact sheet and take it out of the SOA. Now, the third one I've called the SOA mullet. So this might need a bit of coding, but if you've got a Word template, or some licensees still have Word template, it's about having party at the front and business at the back. So party at the front is, instead of having a 1-page executive summary, maybe make it a 2 or 3-page executive summary, but actually that's the advice. So put in what the advice is, the main risks and benefits that are relevant for the client, what the fees and costs are, next steps, 5 pages, and then you're just referencing the bottom line of all the tables and all the analysis and everything that's in the back. And guess what? When QA comes in, you maybe just have to put that in a file. You can just easily separate it and give that to the client.
And just to that point, when you listen to Shail Singh from AFCA, champion bloke by the way, he says he's looking at these 80-page monstrosities and he still can't find the advice. So if you do what Mel just said, that's actually better from a compliance point of view, because you're actually making the advice the hero, yeah?
Mel, we use that 1-page diagram, PowerPoint, and we have numbers on it. We have a diagram, flow diagram. We have 1, and we have beside it in brackets, page 18.
Yes.
Page 43.
Yes.
3. Here's the 5 strategies on 1 page. Go to the SOA and read those strategies, recommendations on each of those pages.
Beautiful.
And they all refer to the 1 page.
Yes. Great. And you know what? Do you know how to use bookmarks in Word? Put a bookmark in there and say, if you want to know more, go to this table, click it, and the client can go straight to that table. Just use stuff like that to make it easier for your client to find the information, but read it quite simply. So the last 2 is keep the analysis out of the SOA. I've seen SOAs with 2 pages of CDT calculations in it. Please don't do that. That's just madness. So put that in your file and just give the client the end figure in the SOA. And repeating info. So we've all seen this. You have the product costs at the front in executive summary, product costs in the main benefits and the risks and consequences, product costs in the disclosure of fees, product costs in the product, and throughout the whole SOA. Why are we telling the client a million times what the product costs are? They're either thinking, I've got to pay all these product costs, not realising it's the 1 fee, or the other thing you see is different product costs throughout the thing because there's been a change. Then you change it here, but you forget to change it here. So try, if you can.
One's coded gross of tax and one's net. And
Or, insurance commission. You're going to pay this premium, but in the disclosure fees, we've got a different premium because obviously stamp duty is not. So now the client's just confused. So try to stop repeating information all the time and make it easier for your client to understand the advice. And I've got 10 minutes to go. So I've talked about that. The only other thing I want to sort of call out here is, file-saving conventions.
Oh,
yes.
So, look, I think about file-saving conventions, not just about compliance. I mean, obviously from a compliance perspective, it's great if we can follow the file because we don't know, where everything is. But for admin support staff, I see a lot of challenges where support staff are trolling through files to find specific things like, if a client comes in for the review, you need to check if their ID is up to date, for example. They scroll through pages and pages to see when the date of the ID was. Naming conventions can help with that. Or SOAs. Doing an ROA, you need to reference the date of the previous SOA. Scrolling through files to find out where that SOA is. So naming conventions can help with that, just to quickly find information.
Efficiencies. And the only thing I want to talk about is if the SOA is removed and you have a different document, which is a fit for purpose document, how are you presenting this to the client? Have you thought about, if you don't have the SOA in front of you, how are you going to go through and give that advice? So get used to maybe a shorter form SOA in order to present to your client. And the other thing is, I think fit for purpose, yes, fit for purpose for the advice, but are we thinking about fit for purpose for how the clients want to receive the advice? Maybe this is a question that we should have in the fact find. Do you want a video SOA? Do you want it documented? Do you want it, I don't know, in a PowerPoint presentation? So maybe that's a question we can put in our fact finds now to understand how our clients want to get that advice and be presented with that advice. So survey your clients and ask them.
Okay, Mel, we might need to, let's move on to Pete. Sorry, Pete.
You really screwed me here, Travis.
Yeah.
I've got 9 minutes to cover. Anyway,
This is my
here's
last
my
note.
exec summary. And why is it called Smackdown? This is, from The Rock would present. Anyway, so here's the exec summary. And look, we've got a lot of content to get through, but to go to the Finura LinkedIn page, we put a lot of content out about this stuff. But most people call us because they think they've got a tech problem, and I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10, it's not just a tech problem. It's a people, it's a process problem. We tend to get involved with a lot of businesses who are merging, who are trying to bring together a bunch of businesses and try to come up with an operating model. And there's so much of a dance done before the deal about how great it's going to be and let's get across the clients and let's work out who's the CEO and all those exciting things, that the technology operating model is a secondary thought. So why we work closely with these guys is that once that detail around operating model and compliance is worked out, then we get involved in the tech side. There's a lot of really important reasons for the future why you want a really consolidated and crisp technology approach, because all this really cool, exciting stuff you're hearing about, AI and all this really fancy stuff, it's only going to work if your data's clean and it's in one location. It's as simple as that. AI is not going to be able to go and find paper files for you, stuff on your desktop, so this is a real challenge, right? And it's so fascinating to me. Every single new client call we get, even from some really large institutions, all they want to talk about AI. But we hear, we've got 4 different fact finds we use, and we still use the word template for this, we've got data here, and we've got 3 different CRMs, and there's got to be some foundational stuff that needs to happen in this sector before we get really excited about AI. If I was going to pick out one really sort of key area, so the 2 key areas are multiple data sources in the one location and unstructured, unclean data is probably the big problem we see. It's just a legacy. You guys have been in business a long time. The more clients you have, the bigger this problem's going to be. And the other big problem we tend to find is just a cultural resistance to change and technology. It's getting better because I think hopefully your younger staff coming through your business saying, hey, why do we do it this way? There's so many better tools we can use. But I would say that's the biggest challenge we have when dealing with tech change. The other one that fascinates me is the lack of due diligence on technology in this industry. This industry has pissed away hundreds of millions of dollars in failed technology projects. Hundreds of millions of dollars, okay? And a lot of it's come down to poor due diligence. The tide is well and truly out from a venture capital perspective. I would be really cautious about partnering with startups that are literally working month to month on funding arrangements at the moment, and particularly when it comes to your primary CRM choices. So I would say the narrative we're hearing from IFAs is a flight back to quality and sticking with providers who probably have the capital strength from a CRM perspective to be around in business for the next 5 years. Yes, question?
Is that really poor due diligence, or is it the actual provider saying they'll do something, can't do it, or won't do it?
I think there's a couple of things. So we've definitely had instances where, frankly, advice firms have been lied to by startups. That's definitely happened. And we've been involved in a few legal disputes, which are really unpleasant. But I would say more often than not, we find that advisors have really thorough due diligence process with investment managers. They run investment committees. They do all this stuff really, really well. When it comes to technology, you boil it down, it's often an emotional decision. People just go and buy new software because the previous provider really upset them about something, or something didn't happen, or they saw a great demo, or they went on a study tour to the US, all those things. So I love experimentation. I think it's good to try new things, and someone has to be the first customer. But what I'm saying is go in with eyes wide open and don't bet your entire business on something which may not be around in the near future. Yep.
Just from a technology provider point of view, RFIs, and I'm sure you do those, Pete, requests for information, a list of things that you're looking for in your software is a great place to start, and we don't see many of them. So I'm saying the due diligence isn't often there.
Yep, thanks, Kate. I will add an AI thing in here. So what's going to happen with AI? So your provider of AI is not going to be some startup that comes and talks to you in the next 6 months. And I guarantee you, I like making predictions. We do predictions every year. Next year at next year's FAAA conference, you'll see 2, maybe 3 technology providers there with .ai on the end of their on their stand, guaranteed. Now, I'm cool with that, but let's call AI for what it is. So the provider of AI to you is probably going to be the existing software companies you work with and maybe your platforms in the future. We see AI as a feature, not a product. It's a feature of tools you're already using. And the experience you're going to get initially, if you haven't played around with ChatGPT, which, by the way, is working really badly at the moment, might have something to do with some stuff going on in America, is from Microsoft. So Finura, we're experimenting with Microsoft Copilot, which is their version of AI, which is going to be embedded into your Microsoft 365 environment. It's in Teams, it's in Outlook, it's in Excel, it's in Word, it's in PowerPoint, so it'll make what you do a lot easier in the future. This is the benefit, and this is why it is so important to have your data in SharePoint, to have your 365 environment configured correctly, because you're going to get the benefit of all these AI features by doing that in itself. So we really like to think of AI as, we love the term co-pilot. It's that thing that's going to be beside the individual. I don't think it's necessarily something that you as a business need to have an AI department or an AI tool. AI is going to be very much an individual experience. It's just going to make the individual more productive. And Bill Gates has put out some really cool stuff for explaining how he thinks about it, and it really is about the individual experience. There is one thing I would flag, given we're at a professional conference here, is that what we haven't discussed as an industry, and not many industries have, is what's our responsible usage of AI as a financial advisor profession? What duty of disclosure do we have to our clients to disclose that we may or may not have used AI in the generation of this advice? Or we may use AI with their data for different purposes. I think that's going to be a really critical decision to make. It's not for me as the technology advisor to say those things, but I think that's something for you as a profession, as a board, need to think about, because I feel the consumers have the right to know when AI has been used. And I'll stop it there. Thanks, mate.
Does anyone have any questions for Pete? Sorry, that was a bit my fault. Yeah. Yep. Can you just wait 1 second, sorry?
Pete, our service is just bringing on the Microsoft 360 Copilot this month.
Right.
Any tips for us in terms of how we actually start and get this going? Because we just go and play with it, sure, but any tips we should look at?
So I would say start small internally. So the obvious ones for me are content generation, so helping you write better, well-constructed emails. So the Copilot and Outlook's really, really good for that. You can give it context as to what type of email you're writing to a client, and it'll author it really, really well. This is particularly useful for if you have employees who aren't good writers, and let's face it, not everyone's a good author of this stuff. It just makes their grammar so much better, well-structured, layout that people can read. So that would be the first thing. The second thing we think is really quite cool is, I know we bag Excel a lot as a bit of a joke, using Excel. Excel is still the #1 financial planning tool in Australia, make no mistake. Now, the Copilot in Excel is quite amazing. So you really won't need to have a pivot table guru in your business anymore doing those things. The Copilot in Excel has a wonderful ability to cleanse data, to find errors and gaps in data. So I would start looking at those things as well. And even from a business reporting point of view, you can actually use that Copilot. You can do extracts out of zero, and it'll produce quite nice insights on your P&L as a good example. So I'd start internal before you start doing stuff with clients. Hi.
Sorry.
Yep.
The portals have been a pretty big conversation over the last couple of days.
Yep.
Where, without doing whole new add-ons or,
So we put out a lot of content on portals. First thing I think portals are the most important technology decision you'll make in the next few years, who you partner with, because it's the one bit of tech the client's going to touch. Clients don't know you use Xplan. They don't care. But the portal's a really different thing. And for anyone that's been through a client portal experience, getting the clients used to it's really hard work. Like you've actually got to really get them in your office and show them how to use it and engage with it. So we would say err on the side of caution and take time through that due diligence process to make sure that the portal provider you pick is the right one for you. All things being equal, choosing a portal provider with the greatest proximity to your data makes the most sense to us. So obviously your existing CRM providers will have portal capability. We think there's absolutely going to be a race for this. And there's some standalone portals that do an awesome job at this stuff too. I personally like portals that have mobile phone apps because I just think stuff happens on apps these days. My personal financial advisor uses a portal, which is an app, a custom app they've got on their thing, which is built by MyProsperity. And it's awesome because my wife engages with it. She signs things really quickly. She messages our advisor. That never used to happen before the portal. So I think on the phone is probably the best tip I can give you.
Thanks, Pete, and apologies again. Just in closing today, I just wanted to say a couple of key messages. Stay in control of what you can control. Don't, if you feel yourself coming down because of all the stuff with the regulatory change and everything you've been through in the last 10 or 15 years, consciously bring yourself up to focus on your clients, your business, and what you can actually control. Secondly, always be trying to have that growth mindset of improving and trying to move forward. And if you need any help, reach out. You can probably tell we're really passionate about what we do. We're all completely independent, so we're not going to try and push you into a platform or a licensee. Tangelo is here to operationalise compliance. Finura is there to help with the tech stack, and Tango is your paraplanning matchmaking service. I hope you've got value out of today. Let us know if you have any feedback or further questions. We'll be around afterwards. But thank you very much.